What is a chess dynasty? Unceasing dominance, move after move, again and again and again.
We have a resignation, we have history.
He is the 5-time FIDE World Chess Champion.
But a chess dynasty can also be cruel. It forces most to defer their dreams until next time. If there is a next time.
It's losing.
Oh my god, did he just blow?
Yeah, he did.
I'm blown away. The game is over.
As the chess world turns to Kazakhstan, the Magnus Carlsen dynasty is set to close. The FIDE World Championship is finally up for grabs. For two chess superstars lying in wait, until next time is now. Jan Nepomniachtchi has methodically done what he needed to do to get another shot at the title. The pressure to seize the moment this time rests heavily upon him.
Jan is running out of resources. He's built every single threat that's possible, and Ding's just countered it.
There's no way to make progress now.
Ding Liren knows firsthand what the end of this dynasty means. An unexpected chance to make history. Can China's best turn his good fortune into eternal fame?
It's a draw. What an amazing defense by Ding. The 2023 world champion will be decided in speed chess.
The legacy of this championship spans across centuries. It reads from the names of chess giants. For the first time in a decade, a new name will raise the trophy and be etched into chess history. It's the 2023 FIDE World Championship. Whose name will next be called champion?
It's Championship Sunday in Astana, and not far from here are the buzzing halls of the St. Regis Hotel. Like every game day today, Jan Nepomniachtchi and Ding Liren will step into this playing arena. But this is like no other day. They'll walk into the glass room and today, with the stunning trophy in sight, play their hearts out. And in the end, one of them will be the new World Chess Champion. The press is ready. We are ready. Welcome to our coverage of the playoffs for the 2023 FIDE World Championship. I'm International Master Tanya Sachdev, and alongside me, the crew, Grandmaster Robert Hess and a Grandmaster Fabiano Caruana. It's going to be an intense day of chess. Robert, has this been the most unpredictable World Championship match?
It's been an absolute roller coaster, and perhaps that's what happens when there are two evenly matched players like Jan Nepomniachtchi and Ding Liren, the numbers 2 and 3 rated players in the world, just a few rating points apart, coming into this match with just about an equal head-to-head record. It's been exciting, it's been fun, it is Sunday fun day, but for the players, there's a lot on the line.
Sunday fun day, I love it. Fabi, with your experience of the 2018 tiebreaks in the World Championship match, how difficult is today for the players?
It's going to be incredibly difficult for both of them. And we can't pick out a clear favorite, I think. We see that the players have been completely evenly matched in classical chess, battling back and forth, but still reaching the 7-7 score. In rapid chess, I think they're also going to be completely evenly matched. Although it's possible that in just 4 games, one of them will break free, and perhaps it's even likely that we might see it end before we get to the Blitz. But in Blitz chess, who knows? It's going to be a bloodbath if it gets to that point, and at that point, anything can happen.
That's going to be crazy, but we've seen all kinds of crazy in this match. Vishy Anand, the 5-time world champion, an absolute legend, called it one of the most exciting matches in recent history. This match has been jaw-dropping from the start. We saw lots of decisive games, 5 decisive games in the first half. including a psychological meltdown in Game 7 by Ding. Game 8, Jan Nepomniachtchi, with his trickiness, survived a tough scare. And then, finally, Kaisa was on Ding's side in Game 12. From a difficult position, Ding leveled the match going into Game 14, which we saw yesterday. And with a draw, a marathon game, it is 7-7, heading to the playoffs. Game 14, Game 7 as well, was an iconic one and the longest of the match. Fabi, Jan was dismissive about Ding's attack with knight g5, h4 coming in, and his play lived up to it. Ding survived a scare yesterday.
Yeah, I think Jan had the absolutely correct initial reaction. His intuition told him that knight g5 and h4, scary though it may look, it's not really based in terms of some sound positional principle that White's played better in the opening and it's now time for an attack. Black was playing completely healthy moves. That's what Jan said, and that's why he didn't believe that aggression like that would necessarily result in some sort of advantage for White. And we actually saw the opposite, that Black was the one who was taking over in terms of the evaluation, maybe not in large part until later in the game, when it suddenly started to get super, super dangerous for Ding. And we were starting to think maybe today is going to be the day that we'll see a world champion. But the day was delayed. Today we will absolutely see a world champion, but yesterday Ding held up. His defenses held up. It was a 7-hour game, and I think we can't underestimate how difficult it is to play precisely after those 7 hours and also after the preceding 3 weeks of chess that we've seen, especially very bloody chess. But Ding's calculation held up. I mean, whether he was tired or not, he played all the perfect moves in that rook endgame, and he survived a big scare. And perhaps Jan is a bit disappointed, but we just have to say that, Ding was up to the task.
And one of the biggest criticisms of this World Championship has been the perceived lack of defensive tenacity. But that script was rewritten yesterday when Ding Liren, he buckled down, played for 7 hours, and he was helped by a pawn push heard around the world. That b6 tactical idea where he gives up a pawn, then gives up a rook for a bishop just to win a rook back, entering a rook and pawn endgame, down a pawn, but holding on. That was impressive stuff from Ding Liren. And Jan Nepomniachtchi, maybe he'll be a little bit disappointed because he had this match victory, it felt, in the bag in Game 12. He let it slip, but he had the upper hand yesterday, so he can feel good that in the last game that they played, he was the one with all the chances. He may not have won the game, but he enters Championship Sunday with some renewed confidence, you would hope.
That's a big upside for Jan. Playing Game 14 just yesterday with the black pieces, being the one pushing the game for the most part of it, with Ding Liren found some critical resources there. And now, traditionally, in the 2016 and the 2018 World Championship matches where we did see tiebreaks, they happened after a rest day. There was a rest day and then the playoffs. But this time, after a grueling Game 14, the players straight away go into the playoffs. And they'll start with 4 rapid games with 25 minutes on their clock. And every time a player presses the clock, gets an additional 10 seconds. In case there's a tie after the first 4 rapid games, that's a 2-2 score, we will see the match proceed to the Blitz playoff. And that will be a best of 2 with a 5-minute and a 3-second increment. If that one ends in a tie as well, then we go down to the final tiebreaker, which will be with 3 minutes on the clock for each of the players and a 2-second increment. The games will be played out till we have a decisive result. Robert, we're going to start with rapid. We're going to potentially have blitz. Is there, in either of these 2 formats, a big favorite?
Such a big question. I know that's what the people want the answer to. Who is going to win today? And going into the rapid portion, we do not know. I know Ding Liren, he has the slight nod in terms of rapid rating, but he's inactive over the board. And Jan Nepomniachtchi has played some excellent speed chess. He won the Rapid Chess Championship in 2022 on chess.com. He beat some big names along the way. So I feel like it's hard to pick between these 2. They are both well tested online and over the board. They have been at the top of chess for over a decade. I don't know who to pick.
It is going to be an amazing fight, and we do know that the players have played each other a bunch of times in speed chess as well. These are their head-to-head scores, but past scores are the least of the concerns for these two players today. It's a totally different universe that they're in. None of the rules apply here. The only takeaway that we have from this graphic in front of us is that it's going to be a close call. As Robert said, it's hard to pick a favorite. But then we didn't need a graphic to tell us that it's going to be a close call. It was clear in the classical games, just the kind of fight that we're going to get today. Now, what's going to matter today is going to be energy. Both are extremely fatigued, not only from game 14, but all the games preceding that as well. It's been a big fight from the very start. It's going to come down to who has those extra seconds in time scrambles. Grit, determination, stamina will come into play. Fabi, is it fair to say that today will be more about the player who makes the last mistake and less about accuracy?
I think accuracy will play a huge part in deciding who makes the last mistake, because very often these mistakes that come at the last moment, they're the result of pressure that builds up throughout the game. So if you're on the back foot throughout the game or throughout the day of rapid chess, then that's likely to lead you astray in those critical moments, because we know the pressure, it's not just a momentary thing, it builds up in your mind and your body. And so it might be down to like just who plays the best chess, and we might only see it manifest finally in some like huge blunder when they're both down to time trouble. But we have to recognize that mistakes and blunders don't come in a vacuum. They're the result of previous factors that build up.
Yeah, it's really well worded by Fabiano there, that we often think, how could they blunder this piece? That's what spectators may think, but it's because of continued pressure. Tough moves have to be played, and it's not just single moves, it's strategies, ideas, and when you're in rapid chess, you can't sit for 30 minutes, because guess what? You don't have 30 minutes to start with. So I think when we look at this match as a whole, Jan Nepomniachtchi has been the quicker player. He's also been the first into the playing hall, and that is true today as well. And I feel like for Ding Liren, he knows he can't sit in for those long things. He is going to have to find ideas quickly. He is capable of that. We have seen in some of the best players in the world, they may be slower in classical chess, but they speed up when the time gets lower.
As Jan Nepomniachtchi walked into the playing hall, he did glance at that stunning trophy that we saw earlier on. That is the ultimate dream for these two players. So much pressure, so much tension, but champions play their best chess in exactly these clutch moments. Now, we also had the drawing of lots after the press conference yesterday, and Ding Liren does start with the white pieces, the first rapid game. And it is going to be a lot about what did Team Ding come up with for this game one. A result in game one could potentially set the tone for the rest of the rapid games. Fabi, how crucial and how critical is game one for these players with 4 games ahead?
Yeah, I think that will really set the stage. And if we see a decisive result, it could really lead to some momentum for whoever wins. Although we have a lot of recent data in terms of 4-game matches between top players, in the Champions Tour, this is the format. And very often we see a lot of back and forth. So someone wins a game, and I mean, I can't count the amount of times, and this has happened in my own matches as well as, if I'm watching matches of Magnus or Hikaru, that we almost immediately see a strike back. And it's kind of remarkable, but because when the match stays level, when it's like draw after draw, then players struggle to break through. But once there's a decisive result, very often that leads to the person in the lead, they go into defensive mode, their play starts to suffer a bit. I've seen this countless times. It even happens to Magnus, that he wins a game and everyone thinks, okay, he's going to run away with the match. But then suddenly we see, let's say, Wesley or Hikaru strike back in the very next game. And it could easily happen in this match as well, that we see it back and forth, because there's this like psychological element where you win a game and you feel like that you're already, at the finish line. Like, I just need to not mess this up. I just need to draw the rest of the games. And that can have a bad effect on your play. So from what I've seen a lot, there is that tendency for there to be not just like a clean, decisive game followed by draws and a clean victory, but a little bit of a struggle there.
It's going to be a big struggle for these two players, and Ding Liren with the white pieces, Jan Nepomniachtchi with black, looking ready to start. And Robert, before we get the game action going, this one's for chat, and this one's for both of you, actually. A prediction. I love predictions. Will we see this match go into blitz? And I'll start with Robert.
Always put me on the spot. I do not think that we're going to blitz. I don't know who's going to win, but I do think we will see a champion crowned in rapid. Mistakes happen more frequently in quicker time controls. I think one side will take the lead and will not relinquish it at a certain point, and so we will see a champion crowned in rapid.
Robert predicts a match in rapid. What about you, Fabi?
I'm going the opposite direction. I think we've already seen so much back and forth. I don't think it's going to stop now. And I think you might call me superstitious, but I think there's going to be an element of fate here in terms of the dramatic twists and turns of the match, and that will continue. And it just feels like these guys are so evenly matched that it's hard to imagine them not going the distance.
And we do have the first move on the board. Ding Liren goes with the trusted queen spawn opening that we've seen him employ in the match so far. And this is a new position. First time in the 2023 World Championship.
Well, when Ding is playing with the... yeah, I like it too. When Ding is playing with the white pieces, every opening is a new opening. He has played pretty much everything you can imagine after we see d4, knight f3. He played one time the London system, bishop f4, one time the Coley system, e3. And now he's going for a third move, c3. Will we... I mean, he doesn't want to put that pawn on c4 anymore. So he's choosing between all these small systems that are kind of a little bit interesting, a little bit poisonous. I know the c3 system because Levon was quite enchanted by it. And I don't know if you remember, Robert, when we were at the Olympiad, Levon was telling us a bit about this c3 stuff. And
Yep.
It's an interesting little system. It's like a modern approach trying to pose black some original problems. And we see already Ding took a pawn and is trying to hold on to it by any means. Bishop on e3, a bit unusual, but it does defend the pawn.
Yeah, and I actually really like these approaches when it comes to quicker time controls. And this is rapid. And you may see Ding's clock at 25 minutes and 56 seconds and be wondering, didn't they start with 25 minutes? They have increment. They will gain some time with every move. They will gain 10 seconds. And I like stealing pawns. If it doesn't compromise your entire position in quicker time controls, because this pawn on c5, good luck winning it back. At some point, Ding will push his pawn to b4. That's why his pawn's on c3. And if he can establish the defense of that pawn, Black will have a lot to prove. Compensation is often a vague term. What compensation does Jan Nepomniachtchi have? He has 2 pawns in the center to 1 for white. So there's some good news for Jan. I think there's more bad news at the moment. I think this was a smart opening choice, but we're just getting started here. We're only 6 moves in. Too early to predict, but I do enjoy this decision from Ding Liren.
So wait, what happens after knight g4 now? Because, yeah, I do want to get that pawn back. And if the bishop goes to d4, there's e5. If the bishop goes somewhere else, we take that pawn. So you have a few choices, I guess. You can... He decides not to, but it looked interesting to attack the bishop there.
Yeah, he castled, but let's look. Knight g4, bishop d4, e5 is fine. To get this bishop out of here. I guess there's h3 kicking this knight away. And it's a very forcing sequence where white takes the knight, you take this pawn, this knight hops back and takes here. So I think Black's position looks quite flimsy. I would not have advised going for this if I were Jan, and he didn't. He castled instead.
But he does, after d4, he does regain the material because the g4 pawn will be hanging. And yeah, you might be right that after knight e4, maybe the h-file being opened is actually to white's benefit. But we didn't see that. We saw castle and Ding decided to hold on to that pawn. I was going to say, like, instead of bishop g2, he could have played b4 as well. Just, clinging onto that pawn. And now knight to g4 comes. Wow. So Jan knows this position.
He must, because that knight may reroute to e5 and over to c4, control some of the squares. But Tanya, I was saying I like grabbing pawns. I know Yasser Saron will be proud. What about you? Do you like white's opening choice thus far?
I don't know if this is something I would go for in a game, but Robert, I love what we're seeing. And to just add to the excitement, after Jan Nepomniachtchi made the move knight c6, that's a position I don't have in my database. It's a brand new, fresh position right out of the opening. Now, when you're playing in a rapid game, time is such a big factor. I don't believe that Ding would have played on in this fashion and in this manner in a classical game, but in rapid, this just makes it so exciting and so fun. Ding Liren hanging on to that extra pawn and bishop d4 on the board. The ideas that you were talking about, e5, it reminds me of some kind of a Grunfeld way of trying to win a pawn back, but reversing colors. So definitely sort of thematic here to try and get e5 in. to go into those complications. But this is fire on the board from the start. This is more than what we could have asked for in game one of the Rapid. And Robert, I love the position that we have. It's going to be fun.
Tanya, quick question. So you said what moves had been played? So Queen C7 was Jan's pretty quick choice here. So this is still familiar territory, or do you think they're starting to get on their own?
Bishop E3 is actually when it stops. After Bishop E3, Shot Castle has been played 3 times, and that's about it. So already it's a very fresh position. Knight C6 never been played. It could be some sort of a transposition, and which is why I'm so amazed to see the speed with which Jan Nepomniachtchi is playing. Fabi, you mentioned that Jan is perhaps familiar with this sort of a setup.
Wait. Now after e5, I don't understand anymore, because there we were getting h3 and the h file was opened, and black couldn't take on b4 in the end because there was queen b1. I don't know if we can just like show that very quickly. Like if we go the previous move, it's a queen c7. Yeah, I think that queen c7 was quite a clever move, because here e5 h3, ed4, hg4, dc3, knight c3, and if knight takes b4, which is a very important pawn, then queen b1 would win the piece because of queen h7. So that's why I'm a bit surprised that he castled now, because with the rook no longer on h1, all of this stuff, well, knight takes b4 can be played. And it's still a question. Knight takes b4, there's a3 in that final position. If we go down the same exact line. dc3, knight c3, knight takes b, or no, I meant like knight c3, and if knight b4, then a3. This is a pretty critical line, I think.
And that, I was to say, Fabi, that's why Jan is sitting and thinking this is really deep stuff. So, you know, we see the engine off to the side saying white is better. Do you think Ding knows this position?
He might. He's playing very quickly, and he didn't really pause after queen c7 either. And this is some kind of, this is like a very concrete position. So you would, to figure these positions out, yeah, I think that he must know this position. It must be in his prep.
He continues to blitz out h3 on the board, e5. We might be seeing this line, and we might see a bishop drop down on that long diagonal in the end. Robert, I don't see a way for white to actually avoid, for black, for Jan to actually avoid this setup that we're looking at with a3 in the end.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can retreat, and I'm just scared of the variation we were looking at, and Jan will be digging deep right now. He's down on the clock. People might be surprised by this. Wasn't Ding Liren the one who was always in time trouble? But he has come extremely well prepared. He answers the question, excuse me, Ding, your preparation was supposedly leaked. You haven't been pressing with white so much, at least not in the opening stage. He came to answer that right here, but knight f6 as a retreating move. The e5 pawn is defended twice. That would force the bishop back to e3. And so what I'm saying is that black has this strong center. White has the extra pawn. Fabi, how do you assess that trade-off?
I think black always has a degree of compensation. It's something which you're a bit hesitant to go for, because there's no like concrete follow-up after knight f6, bishop e3. You'll play a move like, you can play rook to d8, you can play bishop to f5. You have like various ways of playing the position for sure, but nothing which immediately gets back to pawn. Very often black will maybe even play b6, and just try to trade off that pawn, and then use the open a file and the better structure as compensation. But it's one of those, yeah, here like maybe b6, b5 you get scared of. This, I think, okay, we can kind of live with this kind of compensation perhaps, but after b6, b5 is a bit concerning. But he doesn't go for it. He goes for the concrete option. I'm not surprised, because it feels like it's just maybe a bit more practical with the black pieces in this situation too. So let's see, knight takes e3 is going to be played.
I assume so.
And then I think he has to play knight takes b4. What else? I mean, knight d5 is too big a threat to ignore. So you got to get rid of that pawn. Otherwise, you're just going to be down a pawn for not much in particular.
So, can I ask a quick question? So
yeah.
Ding Liren has finally paused. Does that just mean he's recalling and he's moving now? So I think the answer is yes, he's recalling his preparation. So how deep do you think his prep goes here?
I really don't know, because his c3 line allows black so many early options. Like, I guess you could prepare the c5 rather in quite a bit of depth, especially if they're following the computer's recommendation. It's possible that he just kind of got a bit lucky in terms of that Jan went into something that he just happened to know pretty well. But black after c3 can play like c6, bishop f5, knight d7. Basically, there's a billion options, because it's not a concrete position. c3 is obviously not a move which immediately threatens black. so that if he's actually in prep, it's quite remarkable that he managed to get this position in his prep. I mean, there were so many options for both sides, early on. So now the question is, you have a bunch of logical moves with black. You have bishop to f6. I think, Tanya, you mentioned this idea is
Fabi,
super logical.
Fabi, bishop f6, and I just want to point out one small tactic. Black should not get tempted to take the c5 pawn. Queen c5 here, which hits the knight on c3. And of course, if white does recapture the b4 knight, black's a happy camper, picks up that knight on c3. But there is the intermezzo with the knight jumping to a4. Now you've got a double attack going. You hit the queen on c5. Next move, you pick up the piece, and you're basically just winning on the spot. So queen c5 is a little trap here. And as you were saying, Fabi, the knight cannot retreat. The d5 pawn is hanging in the current position. So bishop f6 would make a lot of sense. It's on the board, hitting that knight on c3. Are we expecting Ding to simply sidestep with that rook, bring it to c1, defend the knight, and renew the threat on the knight on b4?
Rook c1 makes a lot of sense, or a takes b4 makes a lot of sense. A b4, bishop c3, rook b1, because you're saying that your queenside pawns are kind of valuable. And let's say bishop takes g4, queen takes d5. On the other hand, black does have the bishop pair. But those queenside pawns are pretty menacing, and the bishop on c3 is a little bit out of the game for the moment. Maybe a5 was actually important instead of bishop takes g4. Maybe you really need to break up those queenside pawns ASAP, and probably win the c-pawn. I guess black is going to be doing very, very well here. So maybe Ding will play rook c1, as you mentioned. Very logical. Can't be a bad move. Kind of forcing bishop takes c3 because you don't want to lose your d5 pawn.
On the board.
We might see all of this. So the move rook c1 was just played, just to show what happened here. Protecting this knight. And yeah, Fabi's saying you have to take this knight, because if this knight retreats, thank you very much for your central pawn with tempo against your queen, against your bishop. White would be up a pawn and just with the advantage in all directions. So I think that bishop takes is forced. But in this line, bishop takes, rook takes, knight c6, queen takes d5, bishop takes g4, we see equal material. But white is very active here on some nice squares, but how much is this?
Yeah, it depends on if white can generate some threats quickly, because if given time, black will be positionally doing completely fine. Of course, black is not going to be better. Black is still, at best, going to be equalizing. But after bishop g4, yeah, I guess, does he have options besides bishop g4? He does have maybe a move like rook to d8. Also makes a lot of sense.
Fabi, does white actually have to take this pawn? Because that's a long-term weakness. So now I'm just thinking, can white push this pawn to g5?
Yeah, g5, rook to d8. So how is that going?
And then
and a knight d4 or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
But then queen to e5 that g5 pawn is also a weakness, which is going to be the knight may be tied to the defense of it. And also, if black gets d4 here, I'm starting to think that black is gaining a lot of very important space.
Right.
So how would you continue?
c5 pawn is loose as well. So I have some nice looking ideas here, but I also have to be worried because my pawns, white's pawns, are very loose in this position. And yeah, it's a bit of a struggle because knight d4, as you point out, queen e5 is a nasty way of attacking the knight in the center, attacking the g5 pawn. Yeah, this is getting a little tactical and maybe good for black.
To me, it looks like black is equalizing here. You can still take on c6, play queen d2, but you're not absolutely thrilled to have taken on c6 and helped black deal with the weakness of the b7 pawn and also the weakness of the d5 pawn. Now both of those pawns are quite secure. So this is definitely an option. Like it looks like a position where white can certainly play on, but probably not for serious chance of advantage. Yeah, g5 is an option, queen d5. Those are the two moves that Ding will be thinking about here. I just say I think both players approached the opening quite well. Ding had some original ideas. Jan played quickly and it seems like in a very healthy manner. So far so good for both of them.
Yeah, and Tanya, I guess, I just asked Fabi, got to ask you too. Would you grab this pawn on d5? I know it's hard to pass up. Or would you push this pawn to g5 and say your isolated pawn is a long-term weakness if I can accurately play around it?
Robert, I have to admit that g5 would not have come to my mind, but the moment you pointed it out, I love that move. g5, you kind of just hold on to your own g-pawn and say d5, long-term weakness, and I'm going to try and target it. The line that we were looking at with that pawn perhaps advancing to d4 after g5, rook slides into d8 to defend it. You're threatening d4. White can have long-term plans of shifting the queen away from d1, doubling up on the d file. I just feel that I can start targeting your d4 pawn. My bishop on g2 will be an absolute monster once you push d4. Look at that long diagonal. And yes, g5 is a grandmaster level move. I'm not sure how easily I would have found it, but the moment that you mention it, I do like it. I do like g5. And the fact that Ding has slowed down at this moment, hasn't just automatically captured the pawn on d5, he's definitely looking at that. And we've been talking about who this opening has been a success for. An amazing idea by Ding to go for this. As mentioned earlier, a brand new position, very, very early on, a fresh idea. Perhaps a certain Richard Rappo had something to do with that, but it's worked really well so far, but also equally impressive how Yan hasn't gone into any kind of panic mode or shock mode. He's been playing fast, and so far, so good for Black as well. Big option. Does Ding grab on d5, or does he keep the pressure with g5?
Well, now I'm wondering about a third, and Fabi, I'm going to throw it to you because Tanya's idea where you can play g5 and queen a4 led me think, can I just start with queen a4 and then try to put a rook on the d file? I protect my pawn from the fourth rank. So the big question, I think we're looking at two branches. Either we trade d5 for g4, or if we're going to try to keep our g pawn and go after the d pawn later, is a move like queen a4 a good idea for white?
Yeah, I was considering this option a bit because queen a4, it comes to mind as a way to prevent black from playing d4. So for example, after rook d8, you can play rook to d1. And you would like to blockade on that square. It also makes it more difficult because the g-pawn push, it does allow the f5 square to be used for black's bishop. And now it's not easy to say where the black bishop will go. It can go to e6, but it's a bit passive there. It can go to d7. I don't think tactically white can take the d5 pawn yet, but I don't see what it's doing on d7, especially here. Knight to e7 would win material, so white would have to wait with capturing that pawn. But then white could maybe consider g5 at a later moment. I'm not sure how black can use this, let's say, discovered attack on the queen, unless it wins material tactically. Because, for example, g5, knight to e5, I think white can play either queen d4 or queen f4. Both are very logical moves. Knight f3, bishop f3, and here we have like an ideal situation for white because the d pawn is firmly blockaded. It's not advancing, and white can also consider a kingside attack with king g2, rook h1, and potentially targeting the h7 pawn. It's not guaranteed that this will lead to some sort of victory because black has bishop f5 at some moment to defend that pawn, but overall white is definitely pressing here in a very, very safe and comfortable way. So for rapid chess, this is like dream for white and nightmare for black. But after queen a4, I was thinking also rook d8 is super logical. But then I think knight... How are you dealing with this? Maybe knight to d4, because e3 allows rook to e4. And now knight d4, queen d4, rook e2. It does grab a pawn, but...
Fabi,
oh,
checkmate in one.
Oh my god. There you go. Don't take on d4.
It's okay. It's rapid chess. I forgive you. But Ding, I mean, he hasn't moved yet. So queen a4, queen d5, g5, three logical moves. So do you think queen a4 is now becoming increasingly likely the more he thinks? Or what direction is he going to take this game? And, well, he just answered it immediately by taking on d5.
I think the most likely option is queen takes d5. I say that after the fact. So this is logical. I mean, here he can continue with rook to b1. I think that's a pretty interesting way to continue. He also can like play queen to e4. I think he would like to see a trade on f3 because that would give the white the very powerful bishop compared to black's knight. But it's not. I think maybe queen a4 was a little bit more of a testing option, even though they're probably equivalent moves. I just like keeping control and trying to establish that blockade on d4. Here it's more like black can probably calculate his way out of any trouble if that happens.
Yeah, Tanya, I mean, you actually inspired me with that queen slide to a4. So I agree, but I guess the question is, do you feel like now Jan's pieces are more free and that he has more ideas of his own and maybe Ding should not have swapped those pawns just now?
It's definitely a very open position, and as we can see, black is coming in with more development with tempos. That queen on d5 can be targeted with the rook sliding onto d8. That pawn on e2 can be targeted with the other rook sliding into e8. So it does look like the next few moves are going to be easier for Jan to make. And what's the follow up here? You've got the c5 pawn. You've got to watch out for that. c5 and a3 are pawns which have been disconnected. Perhaps something to worry about in the long term, but that's a far away endgame possibility. But just something to keep in mind. I think these kind of positions, white can't really afford to play super slow. You've got to find your own chances. And I'm trying to think, what's the move here? Do you start chasing the black bishop? Does a move like queen g5 make sense? I want to attack your bishop. I want to start doubling up on the d line.
You're going to laugh, and maybe you both will laugh at me or with me. But you remember that knight g5 in game 14? Could we see another knight g5? Because it has a pretty nasty threat of queen e4.
Yeah,
That's nice.
Both of those moves that you guys mentioned are very interesting. Knight g5 has a very direct threat. Queen g, well, so does queen g5.
Oh,
But he plays knight
g5
g5.
played.
Oh
Great
my
call
gosh,
by
watch
you,
out.
Robert,
This is a
there.
big threat right now.
So we can deal with this in a few ways. I think maybe queen e7 allows rook e3 though. That could start to look a bit dangerous. Queen to f6 suddenly is forced, and then white gets some time for knight to e4, knight to d6 ideas. So even though black is not tactically losing here, just the knight being on d6 is enough to trouble black quite a bit. So actually after rook e3, maybe queen d8 is forced, but you don't want to get into that territory. So queen e7 feels like you don't want that move. h6 allows queen to e4. I think this is very interesting for white. H takes g5, force, queen g4 attacks g5, and queen to e5 would be the logical way to continue this line. But white has pressure, probably with a variety of moves here. It could be rook b3. Then there's a lot to calculate. Rook b3, knight d4. It could be rook to c4 also. Some move like that might be also very pleasant for white. If you get like e3, and then you slowly pressure the b7 pawn, then I think we're talking about something for white here, some pressure.
Seems way easier for white to play these types of positions.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe some rook to e8 is the right way. Which rook? Rook f to e8? But then white will play knight e4, right? At some point.
Yeah, why not? Pop a pony on d6 and see what happens later. These pawns are weak. That knight is established, entrenched on the square. This looks very, very nice for Ding Liren.
Even sacking the e2 pawn, because bishop e2, rook b1, it's not the material. It's like the b7 pawn is a really serious weakness. Once the knight comes to d6, the tactical danger is really through the roof. Maybe a bishop on a6 kind of defends that pawn, but you don't want to do that to yourself, right?
Hey, Tanya, that feels like a very, very sad bishop. I know it protects a pawn and is protected by the pawn, but then it's out of play on the other side of the board.
And that pony on d6 that you're talking about, that's no pony. That's an absolute dragon on the board, Robert, if that knight does land on d6. And that's what we were talking about, right? White needs to be direct here. White needs to play quickly for the attack. And Ding Liren going with the idea of knight g5, a big threat on the board with the queen stepping back, a double attack, a mate on h7, a potential mate on h7, and hitting that bishop on g4. And this has got to be a deja vu moment for Jan Nepomniachtchi. Because Ding went for the attack with this exact same move in game 14. Now that didn't work out so well, but here the foundation for this attack just feels a lot better than it did in game 14.
You know what I like how both these guys are approaching the game. I think they're playing really well. And also I feel like they're playing better in rapid than in classical chess. And maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like, well, why are we having these 7-hour games when they play better with 25 minutes on their clock?
Are we commentating with Magnus Carlsen or Fabiano Caruana? Because that sounds like his argument. But I do think that the play thus far in Rapid has been really high level. I know we're only 18 moves in. We are going to have a best of 4 match here in Rapid time control of 25 minutes plus 10 seconds added per move. But this has been a high level game. Ding comes with exquisite opening preparation, and Jan Nepomniachtchi thinks for a little bit in the early going and says, you know what, I can handle this. We're in a position where it's not a symmetrical pawn structure. White has these split pawns that Tanya said is a worry in the long term. Black has a healthier pawn structure, but white has all the activity with the knight and the queen. The e4 square is available for the queen threatening checkmate, or for the knight to reroute and hop into d6. So I like the look of this position for white. We see the eval bar saying black is in this. But Fabi, I'm getting the sense that it's much more difficult for black to play. Even on this turn, we could see the evaluation bar swing heavily in white's favor.
Yeah, it's very easy to imagine white So after h6, I was going to say that white has a choice here. Queen to e4 is what we looked at, but I'm really tempted by knight to e4. It's similar to rook e8, knight e4, because I'm sacking the e2 pawn. That's absolutely true. But that pawn is not as relevant, I think, as getting the knight to d6. And after knight to e4, I think we should examine this because it's a really potentially critical line. And Ding, the reason why Ding is thinking at this moment is because it's a huge decision for white. Queen to e4 and knight to e4 are both extremely logical moves, and they lead to very, very different types of positions. One is a pawn sack, the other is just an attempt to kind of secure a slight advantage, keep control of the position. I guess black can. I don't know if black needs to take on e2 or if it's the best option, but let's have a look at bishop takes e2. I guess, yeah, rook to b1. It can also go to e1, but let's say to b1. And how is black supposed to approach this? Like rook a to d8, knight d6, bishop a6, but you really don't want to put your bishop on a6. I would take white's position if black is forced to put the bishop there.
And I think what's very instructive to our audience is that black's extra pawn is this pawn over here. It's not really playing a part in the current dynamics of the game. This knight on d6 means a rook can't go to e8. I'll take that. It's putting pressure on b7, which means your bishop is offside over here. Your knight, it can move, but where to? There is no strong outpost for it. And later, a knife can come to f5 and try to help threaten checkmate, not to mention bishop e4, queen f5. So we have seen a move played. It was indeed knight to e4, so it's a pawn sacrifice, but you know, it's not a movie anymore. This is real life, and this knight is coming to d6.
I like Jan's move as well. I mean, knight d4 looked like the most critical move, although it was really a tough choice between that and queen e4. And I like rook e8 because after knight d6 he gets his rook active. And the real problem with black's position in those pawn sack lines we just looked at were that black's rooks were being dominated by the knight on d6 because they couldn't get access to the e8 square, the c8 square, and so on. The d8 square is kind of like looking into a rock, right? You don't want to take on d6, so basically your rook doesn't achieve much there. But on e2, it really does. And also after knight d6, black can consider a rook to e5. So he plays e3, no longer a pawn sack, rook to e5 on the board. So it's concrete now. Can white establish a knight, or is black's activity... Like, you can trade queen, or try to trade queens. I don't think black will take on d6 in case queen d6 happens. I think maybe queen d6 could be met by queen to a5, for example. It could also be met by a trade on black's terms, but I think queen a5 is very logical.
And
Is there an insane tactic with queen d6, queen a5, knight f6, or is it? Yeah, it's
The
probably
rook on
just
c3
insane, but
is-
the tactic doesn't work. Yes.
But it's such a really instructive idea that knight f6, you give a knight to take this knight here, and you're trying to go after, well, these pieces, but unfortunately this rook on c3 is loose over on the queen side. But that idea, knight f6, by the way, can't happen if a rook comes to c4 or something on the fourth rank. This bishop is also loose. So Tanya is eyeing for some kind of knight f6 check tactics. This knight, of course, can also sink its teeth into d6, and black can't afford to make a move like b6. You're opening up this side of the board, and then your knight f6 tactics will play a part. After taking on b6, there will be knight f6 and getting this knight here on c6. So it's a very precarious spot for Jan Nepomniachtchi. He is up a couple minutes. So Tanya, what do you make of this? First, Ding was ahead in the clock. Now Jan, he's stabilized the positions to some extent, and now he has a slight lead on time.
It's a 2-minute lead, and in a rapid game, that could count for a lot, just depending on how quickly he makes the next few moves. But I like the way how he's handled it. Knight d6 is still a scary threat to deal with. This is a game for all three results where draw is perhaps the least likely. That knight jumping on d6, and I still prefer Ding's position. I think Team Ding can pat themselves on the back for how well the opening has worked out for them in this game one of the Rapid.
I'm with you, Fabi. So knight d6, we know that's the main idea. What happens next? Like, what is white's plan to pile up on either b7, or what's the main idea to follow knight d6?
Yeah, I think if white knight d6 happens, white continues with rook b1, and black really actually just needs to avoid that scenario. So it's not even so much what does white do after knight d6, it's really how does black avoid that, because let's say we put rook d8, knight d6 on the board, I think it's already just a pretty bad position for black. And the main issue for black is that b6 would be nice, but it just probably tactically does not work after cb6, queen d6, rook d6, and b7, I think. Is that... I mean, it's actually quite sharp, but knight b8, rook c8 does seem to win the game, so
Wow.
Okay, this is really close to being okay for black, but unfortunately for him, it doesn't seem to work out.
But Fabi, it's relevant because Rook D8 was just played. And just to remind everybody how we got there, the first move of the variation was Rook D8, which earned a question mark. And you said as much. You said Rook D8 is not a good idea. And the knight just plants itself on D6. And the advantage is growing for Ding Liren. And black has no active counterplay at the moment. Rook B1 is obviously the next move. And B7's in huge trouble.
I think he missed the b7 in the end. He was probably thinking b6 works out. And maybe he should have played queen a5 instead of rook d8 because, like before, my second point before he made the move was going to be that black needs to prevent knight d6 at all costs, and maybe queen a5 was a way to do so by trying to target the c5 pawn before. Because now after queen a5, I think it might be too late to target that pawn. White can just try to defend the c pawn with maybe queen c2. There might be other ways, but then black has to deal with the knight b7 threat. So I think black needed to get ahead of the knight d6 move, and he maybe thought he was by playing b6 here, but b6 we saw it just doesn't work tactically because the pawn on b7. It's a bit surprising maybe visually that black doesn't have knight b8 there. It feels like black is able to cover the 8th rank with something, but after b7 you just don't have anything to cover the 8th rank. It's just very concrete. One move and black would be fine, but so he's gonna do something else because this is clearly.
But B7's extraordinary. Every other move, it seems like black has chances, but B7 would win the game. Instead, Rook H5. So this feels like rapid chess. We are seeing a rook come to an open H file. Is there going to be a checkmate? Well, if this knight gets the E5 into F3. So Tanya, I know the eval bar is going up in white's favor, but this is at least double-edged.
Yeah, this is why you don't care about what the eval bar is saying, because your opponent makes a move like rook h5, knight e5 ideas, and also queen d7, bishop h3. I really want to get my queen onto that h file to give a checkmate. These are things that you start thinking about, you start worrying about. White's plan is clear. White wants to go for the b7 pawn. Yan's plan is clear. He wants to go for Ding's king here. Who gets where faster is the question. I'm expecting Ding to slow down and actually judge how dangerous this attack really is. A move like rook b1 is what he's considering, but then just does black start following it up immediately with a trade of the fianchettoed bishop on g2? That is the key defender in white's position. It would be an absolute dream for black to get these bishops off the board.
I have to show, Fabi, I know what you're going to say, so let's say it together, that rook b1, there's knight to e5, because if the rook takes b7, thank you for a free pawn, I'm getting your queen. But knight f3 check is devastating. If you move your king, thank you for your queen with check as well. If you take, bishop takes, that is unstoppable checkmate on h1. So rook b1 would be a huge mistake from Ding Liren at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Rook b1 allows, it would be very strong if not for this knight e5 idea that you demonstrated. And then the question is, how does white deal with both the idea of knight e5 and the other idea, Tani, that you mentioned, of bishop to h3? Because if white made some passing move like a4, I think black's idea would not be knight e5 because then f4 would come, but to play bishop to h3. And obviously a4 doesn't. Wait, what? The Valbar didn't. A4 was my kind of demonstrative move, and then the Valbar didn't move when you played a4 there. So
maybe a4 is a good move.
So a4 is not a bad move, but it doesn't do anything. So there must be a better move.
Well, I think what it means, Fabi, is that white's just better here because you have a knight that's sitting on d6 and can't really be kicked out. So even if the bishop trade happens, and this is informative for us, that we're looking at this like, okay, bishop h3, that looks scary for white, and the computer's probably laughing. I'll just take and play king g2. So he played rook b1. You saw Yan? He's looking like, are you sure about that? Because knight e5 turns the tables.
Oh, he wants to play e4, but black can play queen takes. Oh no, black can't play queen. Okay, I got excited.
And rook b1
okay,
was
knight e5
the
he wants to play
tempting,
e4.
and you even move, you want to make it in a bullet game, but knight e5, you need that rook on f1 so that you can get f4 in, and the f3 square is controlled. And Yan in seconds plays knight e5. This is turning around and getting super dangerous for Ding now.
And he plays.
Yeah, he wanted to play e4 for sure. That was the idea, but it feels a bit shaky. And now you don't threaten rook takes b7 because of queen takes b7. So black is given room to breathe, and also.
Fabi, I think I see it. Like, can you play this move b6? Because after pawn takes b6, you can't take the queen because knight f3 check again. I've given up the queen, but this is checkmate on h1. I think this is the idea. And I think Jan spotted it. The way he looked at Ding, he's like, are you sure about this? This knight on e5 is too strong.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So when I got excited earlier, I was going to suggest queen takes c5 with the same idea, but after rook c5, knight f3, bishop f3, there's rook takes h5. So I got like momentarily excited by this queen sack. But
I heard you say queen takes c5, and I didn't show it because I didn't want to put you on the spot blundering this position. But you gave me the idea, and so he plays b6.
Yeah, he spots it. He spots the queen sacrifice. Are we gonna see that happen?
No, well, Ding will not take the queen, but this is a brilliant find by Jan.
Wow.
But for sure, Ding will not fall for it.
Oh my gosh, what in
Does he have time to put in f4 here?
He might, but then there are all sorts of problems around this king on g1. It's very open on the king side, and this rook on h5. It looked like a strange move. You're saying you're tunneling on attack. That's not going to happen, but it might happen. I mean, this is a huge attacking possibility. And Jan Nepomniachtchi, Ernest Hemingway, I believe it was him, once said that courage is grace under pressure. He was under pressure on the queen side. He gracefully steps his knight into e5. He will give up Her Majesty on c7 because checkmate is more valuable, and that is what he's aiming for.
So I'm thinking about some like very interesting lines after f4. Because after f4, it's super direct, super critical, and black has the move knight to f3.
Whoa.
Yes.
And so knight to f3 is forcing bishop takes f3.
Yep. Okay, so let's this is exactly what Ding's thinking about. f4, knight f3 check, so takes.
Bishop f3. C takes b6. Because you can't take on f3, queen c5 will win the knight back.
My goodness, check to this king and give me that knight. Okay, good point.
Black is up a pawn, but after c takes b6, black's threat of rook h1, rook h2, it was a threat, but the queen on c7 is now attacked, and it's some chaos. I mean, if you take rook takes d6, then b takes c7, white is promoting first and will win the game.
Wait.
Or not.
Wait. Oh, yeah, no, okay, the evaluation bar reacted a little slowly, but it is winning, yes. Trust yourself.
And so, how is black responding here? It might be some queen move somewhere, like, it's absolutely crazy position.
Oh my gosh, this queen is under attack multiple times.
It could be something. It could be queen takes b6, rook b6, rook h1, king f2, rook h2. I think that's.
Oh, it says give me that queen.
No, it's not.
Because the problem is rook h2. I take this on f3.
Yeah, I thought rook takes d2, but then knight.
This is under attack. This is under attack.
Knight takes f7 probably wins. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you just start taking pawns. Good find, but Fabi, you see these things so deeply. Help us mere mortals. Then you are being very instructive here that this knight was under attack twice. The rook was under attack. So that starts taking some pawns in the process. White would be in a winning rook and pawn ending over there. So, wow, big idea. f4, knight f3 check. But to see after c takes b6, we haven't found the move for black. So the onus will be on Jan Nepomniachtchi in this position. Knight f3 takes, c takes b6. Maybe it's some kind of queen move to go for a checkmate.
d7, yeah.
But that looks... No, it's not that either. I'm making the most natural moves. I'm making mistakes. This is how tricky the position is.
Yeah, this is not obvious in that case.
Yeah. And then queen g2?
You steal the bishop and queen g2. Good idea by Tanya, just covering the checkmate, trying to trade queens. You have a passed pawn. So what in the world does black have available there?
Can black just keep the contact with that knight on d6 and step one more square towards that king? Go queen e7 right now. I want to pick up the knight with my rook. And I'm just looking at these lines with b7. And I think you can still take rook d6, you queen with a check.
But then you take the queen, rook h1, rook h2, rook d2.
Okay, well, we see a move. Let's go back to the live board. We see cb6, ab6 has been played, and that was an inaccuracy, apparently, by Ding Liren, but the evaluation bar is still only slightly in Jan's favor. A takes b6 is a brilliant move. That deserves not just 2 exclamation points, maybe 20, because that was such a nasty idea. Just to remind everybody, you cannot take a queen. This isn't one of my games where I accidentally blundered my queen in speed chess. Knight f3 check would be available. It was an unexpected, amazing idea that Jan Nepomniachtchi has uncorked in this first game of the tiebreaks in the World Championship, but do not take what appears to be a free queen. That would be a devastating blunder. That would lose Ding Liren the game. But so the question that we have to answer is, what can he do to save this game? It says it's only slightly better for black, but everything
only one move here, I think.
What's that?
I think knight to b5. Knight to b5 has to be played. So after rook d2, you play knight c7, you don't lose contact with the f3 square. And for sure, black has a lot of activity. But after knight b5, I don't see like the tactical issues. And what other moves do you have? I think that this is his plan, because otherwise you just lose your knight on d6, or you get checkmated. So a b6. Okay, I have a name for this.
What's it
This
called?
is the advanced Botez Gambit. We saw the Botez Gambit. It didn't work out. This is Jan's prep is to, he's learned from the greats of the past, and he's amended it, and this is the advanced Botez Gambit.
And we see people saying, "Oh no, my queen," a la Eric Rosen. And also Fabi saying, "Oh, who cares about the white queen? Because then you get the black queen with your knight." And it's very important. This is essential, everybody, that the rook needs to stay in contact with the f3 square. Because if you take this queen, just once more to remind you all, knight f3 check, the bishop takes, and then this bishop gets in, threatening checkmate in the corner. That's why we tell you to keep your fianchettoed bishops on the board, because you created a mating net around your king. So Tanya, knight b5, Fabi pointed out the only move for white to keep the balance here. Do you think Ding Liren spots this? Now he's just over 5 minutes remaining.
And he has to, right? Or he goes in for this line with f4, directly hitting that knight on e5, as long as the rook on c3 still has the f3 square under control. I think he is reaching at, he finds it, he finds the move knight b5, but we've got to take this position in for just a second, right? White's queen is hiding on d2. Black's queen can be picked up with the knight or the rook on the move right before this. Jan Nepomniachtchi is sacrificing a queen for a mating attack on the king side. This is stunning chess. Knight b5 played. Will Jan go for the endgame, or does he simply keep the pressure? Go queen e7, move that queen away. You're still putting pressure on that d2 queen. Keep the tension on.
Two tempting options. Fabi, queen e7 looks good for a potential attack. Rook takes d2. How can we not like landing our rook on the 2nd rank, or the 7th rank if you want, but knight takes e7 without queens? Do you think that Jan has realistic winning chances?
I think that he should probably trade queens, because there's also risk for black. Like you could attack, but your rook on h5 could become stranded if there's no attack. And queen e7, white can consider queen to e3. I mean, you can also put the queen on f4. Maybe it's hard to say exactly which is better. Queen to f4 keeps some contact with the bishop on g4. So, but in any case, I'm not seeing like the clear direct continuation for black there. Maybe to trade bishops on h3, because the bishop on g2 is a really wonderful defender. But I'm looking at rook d2, knight c7, and knight to d3 as a very concrete approach. I mean, rather than moving about and going for some vague play, let's go for a direct play. It's usually how you're supposed to play when you have the initiative. You attack f2, rook f1 is met by bishop to e2. That looks pretty passive for white. Maybe you can go back and forth with rook b1. And
wow,
maybe white's holding, but here it's nice for black, because you have the safety net, the drawing. You can play bishop g4, bishop e2, and so on if you want. And after bishop g4,
but Fabi, just quick thing, you're such a super GM that you accidentally find 3-move repetitions that nobody else would find. Like,
yeah, this
bishop
is
g4, rook f1.
Okay, Anish will have a field day with this one.
But okay, so instead of after rook f1, or where did you want to?
Well, if white doesn't play rook to f1 and white tries to avoid this and plays, for example, f3, I'm getting super worried that just like the simple bishop to h3, that white just starts to get checkmated. I mean, if you'd think like you don't checkmate in an endgame, but actually you do sometimes checkmate in an endgame. And for example, bishop to h1 here, I can play. Yeah, you don't want to do that, but after rook g5, I think it's like, I mean, I'm threatening checkmate and whatever. Yeah, and here, king f1, rook f2, and there is your checkmate. So white might have to be super precise, but this rook f1, maybe he's very fortunate that he's holding it together that way. I think Ding has seen this, and that's why he was pausing with the move knight to b5. But somehow Jan took over the initiative fully. Amazing.
Jan's going to keep the queens in this position, Fabi. He's going to be so tempted to keep the queens and the pressure on the board. Look at Ding's time. He's down to less than 6 minutes on the clock. And it's really not clear what's the path after queen e7, because you are hitting the queen on d2. You've got ideas of bishop h3, knight f3 in the air. I'm predicting queen e7 by Jan. No trades here.
But I think one of what we have to consider is the match situation as well. Because if this were a one-off game, I think queen e7 makes a lot of sense, but as Fabi's saying, there is some risk here. This rook on h5 is in an odd spot. It doesn't really have too much mobility, and if we can firmly defend our squares, then white can also look at this b6 pawn as a target. This knight can go through c7 back to d5 at a critical moment, and I know that I have to keep my queen safe first, but I could see that being risky, and Jan does take on d2. I think the match situation plays a big role in his decision making. A draw with black is a good result overall. It means he'll have 2 whites in the rapid, and Ding Liren will only have 1 remaining.
Yeah, I think that it's just a practical decision. He sees after knight d3, white's probably only defense is rook to f1, and then at least he has a safety net of the draw. Also, with the queens on, I just had a flashback. Game 12. I mean, it's obviously a very different position, but the rook was on h6 there. With the game which Jan was winning but lost, that really crucial game. I mean, the rook was stranded. It was an attacking piece which ended up getting stranded, and you can easily see this. You think I have a bunch of pieces surrounding my opponent's king, but the bishop on g2 usually defends things really, really well. So unless you see something concrete there, you don't want to go for it, because I would see shades of that game 12 where Ding starts to vacuum up the queen side. In this case, the queen side is 1 pawn, but he plays queen to e3. He attacks the b6 pawn. He takes it. He gets a material advantage. The attack doesn't work out. You start to wonder, why didn't I go for what was the objectively correct approach, which was rook d2, knight c7, and now the only question to me is, okay, Jan will have a draw in hand if he wants it. Even that is a very good outcome. Will he have more after knight d3, rook f1? Does black have a try there? I see rook to c5 as potentially a try. Knight d3, rook f1, rook c5 is coming to mind here.
And we see Jan, I mean, he is thinking about this position because he can hop his knight in, and Ding Liren, look at him. He's analyzing right now. He's darting from left to right. Both sides of the board are under his focus because his f2 pawn, that's the pawn that we expect to be targeted. He knows he can slide his rook over in the defense of it. But as Fabi is saying, that black rook on h5 will have a new availability along the 5th rank, and that could pose white some problems. So we see Jan has made his move. He was bishop h3 instead. And I honestly think that, without shutting this position down, that black could be in some long-term danger with this pawn on b6 already under attack.
Yeah, I think that this move, I mean, it contains such a direct threat that I do like it. The threat is to take and play knight to g4. And then black, crucially, not only attacks f2, but also threatens rook to h2. So he takes, and he'll probably play king g2. I mean, you might as well kick that king back.
Can he also just bring his knight back? And isn't that threatened to win this rook over here?
Oh, that does. Wait, so knight,
Oh my
knight
goodness.
d5 is a very nice move. So wait, can black play knight? I'm trying to calculate knight g4, knight f4, and then rook h2.
Let's analyze it very quickly. Knight f4, this rook h2. Oh,
f3
somehow this
and g5 is very important.
f3.
G5 is super
also,
important.
The rooks defend each other,
yeah,
so that's
yeah.
good news.
Yeah, actually,
G5.
I'm hallucinating. I mean, you can just play knight to e5 or something like that.
Yeah, but this already doesn't look good for white. So you found knight g4 here to give your rook the h2 score, but that looks like a flimsy configuration. Even a move like rook f3, just preemptively defending, trying to kick this knight out of here. I'm getting worried for Jan. I know the eval bar says zeros, but something about this rook on the h file, you gave us flashbacks to game 12, Fabi. I could see that being a point in this game as well.
Yeah, it's a double-edged position for sure. Because you're really going, your play is kind of one-dimensional, as in you're very often losing your b pawn. I mean, that pawn can no longer be defended, so you're counting on the fact that white will not be able to capture it because the king safety is a more important issue. But if at some point black's pieces get forced back, I like the knight d5 move a lot. I wonder if maybe g5 is an interesting option there, because I want to create that g4 knight f3 sort of. I don't really believe it works because the rook might get trapped with knight f4, but g5 does come to mind as an interesting idea in some positions.
I actually want to show that one very quickly. And Tanya, I mean, this position, it's one where we're talking about how black could have been on the attack. But let's say I'm just trying to force this position somehow. If you play g4, I mean, I still have knight f4, right? Your rook is trapped. So that's the big problem. So Tanya, we see the game. Do you think that Ding Liren might be able to take this one? And do you think that Jan, he feels confident about his chances here?
I mean, this is getting super tricky now, but I do like how Jan has just focused on the king side. He has this one idea of either landing with a knight to g4 or f3, and I'm thinking about these lines that you and Fabi are looking at. knight d5. Fabi, the move g5 makes so much sense, but where's your rook heading after king g2? I was struggling to find a safe spot because suddenly the rook can't go back to h5. Then knight on d5 will jump over to f6, but there's a different approach that Ding Liren takes. He first hits that rook on h3, and after rook h5, he could very well be heading to d5 with the knight. You're still coming to f4. You're still hitting the pawn on b6. But now with this king on g2, knight g4, the checks become real. There's rook f2, rook h2 coming in with the check. So now I like knight g4 a lot more in this position.
Oh, but what a move. Rook
Nice.
b5. He pins along the 5th rank. And, okay, if Black's... What does Black do here, Fabi?
Maybe g6?
Oh,
I mean,
then there's like knight e8 to f6.
knight e8, knight g4. We're
Okay,
keeping
oh,
it
F2 's
together.
Mhm.
I think maybe because how else are you dealing with this? I mean, oh, by the way, after g6, knight e8, there's also, there's not rook takes f2, but there almost is rook takes f2.
Yeah, these tactics are going to be everywhere.
Yeah, g6 is the move here. Also, knight d5 there is met by knight to g4, but you know what I'm looking at?
What's that?
Is it a draw? g6, knight d5, knight to g4, king to f3, rook takes f2, king g4, rook g5, and repetition.
Wow.
Oh.
Oh my
King
goodness.
h3, not a king h4, because yeah, king h3, rook h5. I don't see the mate after king g4 for black, because f5 crucially blunders the e5, g5. It's not mate because king takes h5. So
Very important point.
I know I'm like thrilling all you guys with one draw after the other.
You are.
But we take this draw. This was fantastic. But a
Wait.
different move by Jan. He goes rook d1 and he wants to try to set up the mate, but he's coming in with the other rook to h1 and start threatening a mate on g1. That's what he wants, but the e5 knight, he's got to watch out for that.
It's not a threat of mate, it's a threat of draw, because rook h1, rook e5, rook h2 is a wait. So rook h1, knight e7, king h7 is a draw, right?
Okay, that's actually an essential save at this point because it looks like you just blundered into a mating net. Either rook to h1 sets up checkmating ideas, but this rook to go rook h2. And Ding Liren, he's down to 3 minutes and 21 seconds, but he is finding great defensive resources. So I love rook b5. Knight d5 also looks valuable because he has this check to keep that rook in contact with the knight. And that means rook h1, one of these ideas could be a mistake.
Well, I think rook d to h1 is a draw, and it's what we're going to see. Yeah, nice game. Well played. And knight e7, king h7, rook e5, rook 1 to h2 leads to a repetition of moves. And this is going to be seen on the board any second. I mean, white
King can't step up to f3 because the rook on e5 hangs, so he has to stay connected to that rook on h1. And there we see what a draw this has been. Handshakes. The first game of the rapid playoff ends in a draw, but it was anything but peaceful, Robert.
Oh my goodness, we saw fireworks on display. It's only 5:51 a.m. in New York, but I feel like I'm at a festival. That was some exhilarating chess. These players brought their all to game one. I thought the opening advantage was Ding Liren's, but then he misstepped after planting his knight on d6. So Jan Nepomniachtchi, I think he escaped to some extent with that half point.
Yeah, that was a really fun game.
The accuracy rate of this game, Fabi. If you had to take a guess on accuracy, how much do you think this would be?
Probably like 94%.
It just felt like the players were playing the best moves in this game one. What a thrilling finish that was, ending in a perpetual after sacrificing that piece. And in the tiebreaks, the players start with a level game. This will just set the tone for the rest of the 3 rapid games remaining. It's going to be fireworks from the start. And now Jan Nepomniachtchi will start with the white pieces. Robert, some big moments in this game.
Some huge moments as early as move 4. In a previous game, I mentioned that you could take this pawn c5. I was curious if Ding Liren would go for it. He does indeed. And after e6, plays the awkward-looking bishop e3, saving his pawn. So Fabi, I mean, the early stage of this game, advantage Ding Liren.
Yeah, I think overall Ding was definitely dictating the result of the opening. And it was a really nice opening choice from him. He was well prepared. The critical moment was probably after that rook to h5 move. I know we're going through a lot of really tense and unclear positions, but they were just playing perfectly. And then at some point, Jan made a mistake. Maybe it was this rook to d8 move, and maybe it was based on missing that b6 loses the game because of this b7 move that we spotted, which is really crucial for white, proving an advantage here. Not just an advantage, but the win. And then Jan went for this remarkable rook to h5 idea. I think it was a brilliant practical try. It was based on the tactics that we saw in the game. Ding had some way to an advantage here, but it wasn't easy. Maybe it was the move f4. I was going to suggest this move before Ding played rook to b1, but who knows what would have happened there. Rook to b1 allowed Jan to unleash some beautiful tactics, which we feel like they're so beautiful they should be enough for a win, but they're only enough for a draw, it turns out, with this queen sacrifice. Beautiful.
I mean, this deserves so many exclamation points. To show you all once more, rook c7 was met by knight f3 check. You can avoid checkmate, but you lose your queen, and then your knight black steals a piece. And if you take and say, I'm up a queen, well, you're down a checkmate. Rook h1 would end the game. So Ding Liren was not falling for that. He played his only move, knight to b5. And after the queens were swapped, there were some chances here. The rook on h3 was almost trapped. Some great moves like rook b5, but Jan was able to bail out just in time. After rook to d1, he brought a rook to h1. And the whole point is that after the rook takes on e5, if you take back, thank you for your rook in the corner, that still will be equality, but let's just force the draw. No risk taken here. So we saw a draw in game one. There was a lot of fight in that one, despite only 35 moves. The players really were trying to throw their punches.
Yeah, I really like this game. I think that they were really, not only was it beautiful for us to watch, but it was also really, really well played. I mean, we can only really spot to one moment, I think, to criticize from each player, maybe. Rook to b1 by Ding and rook d8 by Jan. I'm not even sure if we can criticize that move because it was so complex. But Ding missed a little bit here. He definitely had some chances to push for more, but it wasn't easy. This rook h5, even if the computer says it's not the best move, I still really like it. And I think sometimes the best engine move and the best practical move are different.
I think it's safe to say that we just saw one of the best games of this World Championship match. The second world champion, Emanuel Lasker, said, if you find a good move, look for a better one. And that might be great advice for Classical, with seeing the players play the best move one after the other. With Fabi predicting perhaps a 90% accuracy there. This was a phenomenal game one and start to the playoffs. The players are back in their rest area. They will be back in the Gladiators Arena for game two, and we will be back after this break with all the action from Astana.
Hi everybody, International Master Danny Wrench here, Chess.com's Chief Chess Officer. We are here and excited to be collaborating and partnering with World Quant as an official partner of the Champions Tour in the year 2023. I'm now speaking with Chief Strategy Officer for World Quant, Natish Maini. The people have met us, and now time for the big questions. Jumping right into the basics, tell everybody a little more about World Quant and what exactly is it that World Quant does?
Thank you for having me, Danny. And you already introduced me. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at World Quant. World Quant is a global asset management organization. It was founded by Igor Tulchinsky in 2007. World Quant today has over 850 employees who are working towards designing investment strategies in multiple asset class across global markets. World Quant believes in empowering the ideas of the talent across the globe, and we have 23 offices in 13 countries today.
Amazing, amazing stuff. So tell us now a little bit more about this project called World Quant Brain.
So World Quant is built on the belief that talent is global, but opportunity is not. And we strive to take this opportunity to everyone around the globe. World Quant Brain has been designed as a tool which empowers us to take that opportunity to anyone.
That's fantastic. Seriously, that's amazing. I had no idea about that. Learning about this along with our viewers, and obviously as a website and a company with a mission to also connect global communities and increase the opportunity for chess, that makes it even more of a natural partnership. Tell me a little bit more from World Quant's perspective why you guys run the IQC.
So World Quant has this mission of democratizing quantitative finance. And International Quant Championship is one of the tools we have to spread the message about this opportunity which World Quant is offering to everyone to be a quant in the world in the quantitative space. And International Quant Championship empowers the individuals to utilize their ideas and show that they can do it, and gives us an opportunity to take this message to them wherever they are.
That's great. Now, you said the finals will be in person. Was I right that it'll be in the Bahamas? That sounds like a pretty great location. Can I come?
Yeah,
Is that
absolutely,
is that
absolutely.
is
And
that I can? Okay, so I don't know that I'm qualified to be in the IQC, but tell everybody a little more. So the finals are going to be in the Bahamas. What will that be like for those who make it?
yes, so the finals, as you said, is planned to be in Bahamas for the IQC. So WorldQuant celebrated its 15th anniversary last year in 2022. To celebrate that occasion, we are getting the whole WorldQuant organization together in Bahamas this year. And we decided that we will organize the finals of IQC at that event. So this will give an opportunity to our finalists to meet the WorldQuant team in person. It will give them an opportunity to watch the culture and rigor of the organization. And we are very excited that everybody will be able to get together at that event in Bahamas.
Well, this has been awesome. Nitish, thank you so much. This is where I remind everybody it's their chance to get involved in the IQC, the International Quant Championship. You can use the command IQC. You can visit the World Quant Brain website. We encourage you to do so ASAP. Registration is open until May, so it's time to jump in. And maybe you'll get to meet the CSO and others in the Bahamas. Maybe I'll be there. If I'm lucky. I don't know, but it sounds like a great time either way. And Nitish, the Chess World and the Champions Chess Tour, thanks World Quant for their partnership. And we're looking forward to the rest of the year together.
Thank you, Danny, and good luck to the community for participating in IQC.
WorldQuant is an official partner of the Chess.com broadcast of the FIDE World Championship. They are a global firm that builds complex mathematical models to identify market inefficiencies. Now, WorldQuant Brain is bringing together its International Quant Championship and the chess community to hunt down the next generation of quant finance specialists. Because nobody knows how to analyze a position better than a chess player, right? If you think you have what it takes, register for the International Quant Championship. Head to go.chess.com/IQC or use command IQC in chat for all the details. We are out of a mind-boggling game one, and this one is going down in history books as an absolute masterpiece for the ages. We saw an incredible attack, a counter-attack, with both players really having to play accurately with just minutes and seconds on the clock. That was some fantastic chess that we witnessed in game one. Fabi, what do you reckon? How are the players feeling after this phenomenal game one?
I think overall Ding missed a little bit more than Jan did there. Jan, I think, can be very happy that after a dangerous opening, he made a draw. He might feel like he had some chances there because at some point we saw it was very close. Ding had to make only moves. But objectively speaking, Ding found all the moves, and the draw was a pretty natural result. But for Jan, yeah, draw with the black pieces in the first game, avoiding some danger. And now he has the white pieces, and he'll be looking to press. Definitely a good start.
A great start for all of us here. Loved every moment of that game, Robert. We see Ding has arrived. He is meticulously adjusting his pieces on the board. Now, Jan, we've seen him play the 1e4, the King's Pawn opening through the classical games. We expecting him to stick with that for the Rapid?
Yeah, I think there's no reason for them to change their repertoire, their mindsets. They played a very interesting classical 14 games, and here in the Rapid, that game one, I don't think that means that anyone needs to change anything. That was a hard-fought, accurate game. Great play from these two. It's an exciting start for the fans, probably a bit of a nerve-wracking one for the players, but it wasn't too scary. Neither player was under too much danger, even if it was a little bit worse for Jan out of the opening.
I think that for sure it was a position which was dangerous for Ding at some point. And dangerous for Jan, but never to the point where they thought, I'm going to lose this game or anything. So I don't think that they were super scared or nervous at any point during that game, although Jan probably realized when he's played Rook H5 that he is bluffing a little bit with this. It's the good thing with that bluff is that it was a bluff with a very clear, concrete idea, and it worked out to perfection.
Amazing resourcefulness there in that last game. And we see in just a few moments, the game two will be in action. And Ding leaving his chair for just a second, so maybe we might have a couple of minutes that might be delayed. Well, and he comes right back smiling. It's good to see a happy Ding.
Always, and Ding has been so great during the press conferences. leaving his heart out for the world to see and to enjoy. And we see the handshakes and get involved. I know that in chat the polls were up on who you think is going to win, but look at this view. Jan Nepomniachtchi playing the Spanish.
Yeah,
No Berlin, no anti-Berlin.
This was to be expected. I think that Jan would continue with his e4, and we're going to see some anti-martial. I think it makes sense for Jan. I think he's going to play this a3 knight c3 line again, because that's the line he knows best. I think he's a real expert in this line. Oh, he goes for a4 instead. Okay, so a4 is an invitation to bishop d7 or b4, but bishop d7 is considered, let's say, the h3 is very unusual. h3. Okay, so this is going to be a surprise for Ding, or maybe not. Castle short quickly.
Surprising, not one bit. He's playing this instantly, and so is Jan. So, bishop e3. We saw that idea played in an earlier game when the pawn was on c3, but still, that bishop develops out. And the eval bar, it's not overly impressed, just saying, all right, both sides, you're equal here. So, Tanya, they're both blitzing it out. What do you make of this opening?
It's again relatively a fresh position after bishop e3, hasn't been explored that much, but some of the top players have in fact had this position, including a certain Tomaszewski. So there's definitely something to that. We know that Tomaszewski is perhaps potentially part of Jan Nepomniachtchi's team. So there could be a lot of discussion there, could be his idea. Now in that game, after bishop e3 was played, Black did reply with knight to a5, and then the usual stuff with the c-pawn advancing. So we see Ding slowing down a little bit, but these are ideas that he's definitely familiar with. It is a thematic way to carry on in this position. Are we expecting him to go for this plan with gaining space on the queen side?
The funny thing is, I feel like I had a very, very similar position a long time ago with the black pieces against Kazakhstan. I think instead of h3, he was playing this move bishop to e3, which is, it's so similar. And Ding goes for knight a5. White's plan was to play knight c3 at some moment.
Whoa.
And now he captures a pawn. Okay, so we're going to... So this is kind of typical way to capture, but White can play knight c3 and try to slowly get that pawn.
But bishop d2, so he's kicking this knight, or c5 is available, but that does give the d5 square. I guess that's Jan's major point. He wants this access to the d5 square that would be a strategic victory. If black plays c5, pawns 2 squares apart, leave the square in between vulnerable to the opponent, and then this knight would gladly hop in. Maybe the bishop would go back to g5 to take this knight. But Bobby, isn't there some pressure down the b file? Won't that be annoying for White to deal with?
Yeah, I see no issue with c5. I'm sure it's a fine move for black. I had a very, very similar position with the white pieces against Daniel Dubov. And basically, he took the pawn a4. At some point, we had this, where I could have gained a lot of light squares, but the light squares are not the only factor. As you mentioned, the b pawn is a weakness. And I like c5 much more than knight to c6, because after knight c6, the knight is really in the way of stuff, and white can continue with, let's say, bishop to c4, followed by, okay, well, it threatens a4, and also you can continue to put pressure on that pawn with knight to c3. And knight to b7, at least it keeps contact with the bishop on d7 no longer is blocked from the a4 pawn. Knight c6 he plays. Maybe, I mean, it might be a fine move, but it looks unusual to me too, because after bishop c4, you're threatened to lose that pawn immediately. So how do you respond to that?
I don't know. I mean, this knight c5 felt so natural. And Tanya, you were the one calling the shots in one of our earlier games in this match. With that rook b8, there was pressure on the b file. But do you think that bishop c4 and the a1 rook is opening too fast for black to make pressure down the b file work?
That's a lot of pressure to predict what is White's idea here, but it's clear what you're saying. Black will, after doubling up on the A file, make the most of this B file for the rook. We can quickly expect him to start targeting, for Ding to start targeting the B2 pawn. And I was just, while you guys were discussing these opening subtleties, I also want to just point out that that game by Tomaszewski was against a certain Eric Hansen, played online in a speed chess game. Now, in that game, the move order was different. It did not arrive exactly the way we saw this one, but the same position. But the change up, the switch up from what Eric did was, in fact, when Ding decided to take the pawn on a4. The move of choice in that game was the move b4. So keeping a more closed position on the queen side. And eventually we saw the game develop with the c-pawn advance. But none of this happened in this one. Ding Liren again choosing the most direct way to play He does capture on a4, knight c3 on the board by Jan Nepomniachtchi. So he wants to get to the a4 pawn with his knight, also defending the b2 pawn. And now Ding has to be a little careful because there is a weakness on a6, and that's a lifelong weakness for this game.
But
Yeah,
you can
Fabi,
play.
you didn't like this move, knight c6, but are you still feeling the same way? That was going to be my question for you.
I still don't like the move very much because I thought c5 is a more natural way of playing it and more combative, more difficult for white to round up the a4 pawn. I mean, here black can consider a3. The point is probably white is obligated to take because you don't want to play b3. I mean, you don't want to block your bishop. Yeah, this would be maybe not bad for white, but very, very silly to do. So b takes a3, and now we have a symmetrical structure. So at least black is not dealing with the issues, Tani, that you mentioned of the isolated a pawn being a weakness. But white has knight d5 ideas, and the knight on c6, black spent a lot of time playing knight b8, c6, a5, c6. So that was a waste of time, and I still feel like white is the one with pressure here. Although it has to be said that in all these positions you have pressure, but it's usually very, very manageable because black remains so solid. I mean, the Marshall is one of the most solid openings. Even if it goes a little wrong, usually it remains pretty relatively decent for black. We saw that in the previous match, Jan against Magnus. I mean, Jan was very often getting a bit of an advantage from the opening, but usually was neutralized after some accurate play because just black's position is quite healthy in its in its essence.
Yeah, the shell is there for black. I mean, it's a solid foundation. There are no targets immediately exploitable. But this bishop on a2, clearly better than the bishop on d7. This bishop on d2, clearly better than the bishop on e7. So that's what I would highlight for people wondering, why would white be better here? It's going to be even material, especially if black jettisons this pawn right back and then the pawn structure becomes symmetrical. The black bishops are worse than their white counterparts, and that is the problem, is that Ding is just a bit passive. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to lose the game. That doesn't mean that he might even face pressure, but it just is something that's a bit uncomfortable in the starting position. So, Tanya, one of the ideas that I was thinking is, can I move this knight again? I know I've already moved it b8 to c6 to a5 to c6, but can I move it up to d4 this time? I'm wondering if I can try to be greedy and keep this pawn a4.
I like it. And that's what we saw Ding do in game one as well, right? He just snapped up the c5 pawn and then held on to it with dear life for as long as possible. So a3, a really nice way to take care of the strategic points that you're mentioning. But because of these dynamic factors like the strong bishop on a2, Ding can very well try to hold on to that a4 pawn for a while at least. The move knight d4 comes to mind. And if white was to trade on d4, yes, you do kind of leave your king side a bit weak. White's got these long-term plans of f4 and maybe a potential pawn storm. Knight e2 will hit the d4 pawn. You'd have to make the move c5. And it's not a great extra pawn. But look at that b file. Black can also have trumps in the position. Black can start to create counterplay down the b file while white will aim for a king side pawn storm, taking advantage of that bishop on a2. Knight d4, especially after Ding's last move, knight to c6. I won't be surprised to see that on the board.
Fabi, your turn. Do you think knight d4 is available to black, and what would white do in response? Do we think that he would immediately take and play for the kingside pressure like Tanya said, or is there something to worry about on the queen side?
I think I would probably choose knight d4 because other moves are a little bit passive, and with knight d4 you're giving your opponent a difficult. I mean, you're giving him some difficult problems as well. So to me, it looks most natural, the line that you guys suggested, with taking knight to e2, c5, and for example, a move like knight to g3, black plays rook to b8, and white deals with the threat to that pawn with some move. And then it's not like I want to keep the rook on the a file though, because after bishop e6, I want to be able to take on a4 in the end.
And he just made a move, and it was rook b8 first. So yeah, that looked at least active for black. He decides to try to get immediate activity, but he does give back this pawn on a4.
So knight takes a4. It'll be played because it's the only logical move. There's no other. I mean, why would you not take a pawn which also defends the b2 pawn? So is his idea knight to d4 here? I would guess it's still knight d4 with the idea that if you take on d4, the knight on a4 becomes a little bit out of the game. But white can play bishop c4 here, and to be honest, the structure is just better for white. That's the main thing. And if you're ever worried that your knight is out of the game, you can play b3 and get it back at some point. So not sure I'm really liking this rook to b8, but he definitely has some idea in mind after knight takes a4.
And Tanya, rook b8. It's a move that Ding Liren played in a different game. It got him in trouble. I believe that was back in game 9. And so we see the rook on b8 once again. Or what was that, game 9? I'm trying to remember the game.
That was one
They
of the
all
draws,
merged
right?
Together.
Wasn't that?
It was a draw, but Jan was better.
I feel like it was game 11, right before that craziness that we saw the next day. I could be very wrong there.
We're struggling to remember. All these games seem to blend together, but rook b8, that was an inaccuracy by Ding in another game, and here he goes rook b8 again, this time for the open file. In the other game, it was just to protect the pawn. But this position, I feel like with Ding Liren on the clock, Jan's not even in his chair right now. Sorry, it's Jan's turn, but he's not in his chair, but Ding is concentrated.
I can guarantee you, Jan might not be in his chair, but he's definitely in the resting area looking at this position and thinking about his next move, because you don't have that kind of time to waste in the rapid games. But this idea of rook b8 that you're pointing out, and we see Jan arrive, I wonder if he's going to just blitz out his move right now. As you said, knight a4 makes so much sense. It combines the ideas that we were talking about, right? The b file, activity on the b file for black, and that jump with a knight to c6, from c6 to the d4 square, trying to control the center. You don't care about doubling up your pawns there. Jan, with his expression, slightly surprised as well with what Ding has chosen, rook b8. He's wondering, why would he do that? Why just jump with the knight to d4 already? But that's the move of choice here, expecting Jan to go knight a4. And in that final position we saw, it's still a lot to play for. Black's bishop could perhaps come to b5. Well, we'll see. What is Jan Nepomniachtchi's decision? And what is the idea behind rook b8?
They say mistakes come in pairs. I guess inaccuracies often come in pairs as well. Knight takes a4 is played. So, Fabi, I mean, you have played the Spanish from both colors your whole life. This does look like a pretty dream situation for white, but something you said earlier that resonates with me, that even when white has these advantages, it's like these small things that you can work on for a long period of time versus some kind of immediate checkmate. So how big of an advantage do you think white has here? Because the eval bar does say about half a pawn better for white. Like, if you're playing, what do you think, practically speaking, the advantage is?
I would be, actually, unless I saw some problem, I would be relatively confident in my ability to win this position with white. Maybe it's because that this is like kind of what I'm pretty good at, which is these types of positions with the white pieces. That is, with the black pieces, I don't think I'm very good at them. But with the white pieces, I'm usually like quite confident, because it might not be much on the bar, but white's moves are easier. It's, you want to play bishop c4, you want to play b3, you just target the a pawn. I think, Tanya, you mentioned this a pawn as a really important factor in the position, and if the pawn was on the b file, black is completely fine, just equal. With the pawn on the a file, it's an open file that stares down on that pawn. It also allows the c4 square as an outpost, maybe not forever an outpost, because if black got c65, he would get control over that square, but c65 is not happening anytime soon, so I look at that square as a bit of an outpost. And then the question is, what's black's follow-up here? And I also don't really understand why you play rook b8, and then after knight takes a4, you start to think about the position, because obviously what other move was there besides knight takes a4? And I think, okay, knight d4 is critical. I mean, you can play knight b4, but after knight b4, I can play bishop b3 or bishop c4. Both moves seem, but bishop c4, I'm a bit worried that maybe some moment d5. Even there, I'm not seeing exactly where d5 comes, but I'm seeing like bishop c4, c6, some sort of counterplay, which is, he needs counterplay at this moment. So knight b4, bishop to b3. The problem is you can't get d5. Yeah, he plays knight d4 set. So taken bishop c4 will probably be played, right?
And Fabi, this reminds me of that game that Robert brought up earlier. Even in that game, Ding rushed with rook b8 and then went into a long think on every move after that. We see Jan Nepomniachtchi in this game 2 of the Rapid has already broken away on the clock. He is up by almost 6 minutes. 23 minutes to Jan, about 17 minutes there to Ding Liren. So can Jan keep up building the pressure on the clock? He's got a very pleasant position out of the opening. The line that you wanted to check out, Fabi, we're expecting a trade on d4 because the knight on a4 is hanging right now. So after knight d4, black will pick up that knight, and then you move the bishop to c4. That's the idea, start targeting the weakness on a6. And I'm just wondering, does that give Ding Liren the opportunity to not only defend the pawn on a6, but offer a bishop trade to move bishop b5? I really want to get rid of this very strong, monstrous, light squared bishop that white has.
I don't want to
Yeah.
speak for him, but I'm guessing Fabi's going to say you just play b3 and you just work around it and leave this pawn on a6. And we have seen the move bishop c4 played before the exchange of knights. So he doesn't double black's pawns in the center. He said, you could take me on f3. That just gets my queen out into the game over here. So bishop b5 is still an idea, but this knight now will be able to go back to c3. So he says, you can keep your pawn structure undamaged, but my knight gets more activity this way.
Yeah, an important little tactical point here. And Tanya, I think your idea of bishop b5 is actually really important for black to even play at this moment. But an important point is if black takes on f3, takes on a4, and takes on b2, it might look like black is winning the pawn with another one attacked, but after bishop to b3, unfortunately for him, his rook gets trapped. It's a very typical refutation of these sorts of pawn grabs that we sometimes see. And here, bishop c3 next move wins the rook. So I think we'll see bishop b5. I like that idea a lot. And I think that's also why Jan didn't rush with knight takes d4. Because now white can consider not taking on d4, can consider perhaps b3 is a bit better. And I think now bishop c4, bc4. The reason why it might be better is because that knight on a4 has a path to a much better square, right? With black's pawn on d4, that knight would be restricted. It could eventually escape to b2, but even on b2, it remains a bad piece, and then so white would have to take a lot of time, or play c3. And c3 has its own downsides, but here, if I play knight c3, I just target that a pawn.
He plays a
We
completely
didn't see
different
bishop
move.
b5.
Not bishop b5, which
Wow.
just felt so natural, but he puts the pawn on c6. He's offering the a6 pawn, and I am trying to understand, are there some tactics if white gets greedy here, or is black just looking for a central break with d5?
He's playing for d5. He heard Fabiano Caruana speak, saying, I desperately want some counterplay. I don't want to sit passively and have to defend my weak a6 pawn. Have it. Take this pawn, and he will throw in d5. Not immediately, because there are some pawns that are hanging in the position, but if we just analyze this for a second here, that this is a hanging pawn, it can successfully be captured, but I think you can play rook a8. Do not bring your bishop into b7. It will not get out of there. You'll lose your piece. So you drop back. d5 hits you a la tempo. And if you start taking on d5, oh, watch out. Everywhere, you've given black the center. And I like the way that Ding is playing dynamically. I think that this is the way that often top grandmasters survive games when they're under pressure. They say, you know what? I'm not going to be under pressure and you're just going to play freely. I am going to cause problems that you will have to deal with as well. So have that extra pawn. That's not the main storyline of this game. I am going to control the center.
I see a very interesting idea for white. I don't want to take that pawn, and I want to deal with the threat of d5. So I want to take on d4, ed4, and bishop to f4. And now d5 will lose the rook. And let's say the rook moves somewhere, although I'm not even sure where it could move to, which is a safe square. But just to illustrate the idea, after rook to a8, which renews the threat of d5, I want to play e5 here. And the point is if d takes e5, bishop e5, now c4 is a real outpost. Now the bishop is on that diagonal forever. You cannot kick it away with d5. You can't restrict it with d5. And the positional advantage here, I think, is borderline overwhelming. Like, this is already, I think, territory where we're talking about Jan just winning this game. And probably maybe even without big difficulty. Because the valuation might be similar to the previous game where black was playing rook h5. Maybe it was something similar to that. But there's a big difference between a better position, which is based on some very concrete details, and a better position, which is just based on you playing natural moves. And here, white just plays natural moves. It's one of those positions that plays itself. It might at some point become difficult to convert this, but that might already be when it's like, you know, an objectively winning position. This I think that most top players win with the white pieces. So taking bishop f4, I really like that for white. I really don't see how black responds to the threat of e5, and it could become very difficult for black. Maybe rook to b4. I think we need to.
I'm serious.
Actually, I like that. No, it's funny, but I like the move. But after b3, how are you dealing with, because b3 renews the threat?
Oh, I was
Are we
hoping.
looking at another rook h5?
I was thinking about it, but I was being instructed first of all that this knight is trapped, so you can't take the rook. It's not giving away material. But I was going to say, will we get another rook h5?
Black should. I mean, this is not a matter of, you know, if it's bad or not. It's a matter of, okay, my position got bad. So now we're threatening d5. We're threatening, I don't know if we're threatening g5, but g5, g4. I mean, I'm looking at it, at least. At least it's counterplay. But d5, if you get d5 in, you have chances. I mean, might still be bad, but the bishop at least would be relegated to somewhere lousy, like a6 square is obviously a lousy square, even if the bishop doesn't get trapped there. So rook to b5, but I was also thinking rook to b4, is that a move after bishop
Might
f4?
be seeing this play out. I just want to let you guys know that knight d4 is on the board, so the action that you're looking at might happen if Jan Nepomniachtchi does make the move bishop f4 once the knight's recaptured. Rook b5. Robert, I sometimes feel like we're commentating with Petrosyan and not Robert Hess, with all your exchange sacrifices.
So I've always loved the exchange sacrifice. Always. And bishop f4 is played. So is that Jan Nepomniachtchi sitting there, or is it Fabiano Caruana? Who knows, because they're playing the same ideas. But I love a good exchange sacrifice. You'll hear me do that. Even when it's bad, I'll suggest it because you have to look out for it. I think sometimes we're a bit too materialistic. We think, oh, that rook, I've been told, is worth 5 points. A bishop at knight is worth a little over 3, let's say. And that means
Robert,
I shouldn't give up my rook. What's up? You have a line,
sorry to interrupt, but I love your rook b5 idea, and I love it even more because I saw the response to b3.
Okay,
rook
let's
b5,
do it.
b3. We insist. We play d5.
Okay, we'll show this. Rook b5, b3, d5. And if you take the rook, or let's take the pawn first. Let's take the pawn.
Yeah, but then knight takes d5. Now you can't take the rook. That was the idea.
Oh.
And now you might, because now the bishop on c4 is no longer, like, it's restricted now. If you give it up, then you gave up an important part of your position. But maybe, yeah, bishop takes b5 is critical. So I was excited momentarily because a b5, knight b2, I thought that we would win the e4 pawn. Now I see it's not so easy. And knight takes e4, queen d4, it's just not... That's sad. I was getting excited for a moment, but it doesn't seem to be working out.
All I'm hearing is that you ruined my exchange sacrifice. That's what's going in this year.
Wait, let's continue. Okay, knight b2, bishop b4. I know that, you know, I messed up, but I'm still saying that knight on b2 is a bad piece.
So I think what you're really saying, in addition to that, is that for a rapid game of chess, it is very difficult to play with bad pieces. And look at the activity that black suddenly has. This bishop on b4 can come to c3. There's no rook e1. That's going to be an open file. And I want to put my rook on e8. So white is up material, but black does have some of the benefits in this position. I actually could see, not this specific line, I really doubt it's going to happen, but I could see something like this occurring, and then Ding saying, I don't want to sit passively, I don't want to defend, and he's going to throw caution to the wind and play an exchange like sacrifice with rook to... I love rook b5. I'm hoping we see it, and even if we get rook h5, come on, Ding, you're too strong.
Rook b5, it would be so committal to put that rook on b5 and try and swing it to h5, but it was an amazing idea. Not played. He does offer a trade on e6, and I'm just trying to understand this move a little bit because now white does have the option to actually pick up that pawn on a6. Bishop takes a6, and if black was to swing with the rook to a8, you can fall back with the bishop to c4, trade on c4, and the d4 pawn is hanging. It looks like the kind of moment where, in fact, Jan Nepomniachtchi can be up an extra pawn. Bishop e6, where is the compensation for this a6 pawn? Now you don't have d5 ideas. Again, that rook on b8 under fire with that bishop on f4.
I'm shocked if he takes that pawn. It might be the best move. I'm just shocked if he does it.
Because?
I mean, it feels like the bishop is just bad there, and if forced to retreat, black will somehow pick up the e4 pawn. And maybe it's not the case, but intuitively, I wasn't even looking at that move. I mean, I know that it's like it's a free pawn and everything, but I really was not looking at that option as even like a legal move. But that's probably just because
Abby, that hurt. You make me feel like such a bad player right
no,
now.
I was going to
really hurt because I feel like that would be the first move that I would go for.
No, I was going to say that it's actually a good move. So this is like this is a case where I should be considering the move, and I'm actually sure that you're correct that bishop a6 is the critical move, but something in me just doesn't want to play it.
Well, I think it's a stylistic choice, right? Some people want extra pawns, which is fine. Other people want the positional triumphs in the position, right? If you take, I'm guessing, Fabi, you still want your e5 idea? Is that what you're going for?
Yeah, I do.
And he is with Fabi. Super Grandmaster Chess doesn't consider bishop a6, plays the move rook e1. You were saying it's a stylistic choice. Robert, maybe it's a strength choice. Bishop a6 just intuitively feels like a move that you don't want to make with that bishop on a6 and having to double up the pawns in case there's a future trade on c4. And first, Jan decides to just defend the e4 pawn. But this does allow the trade anyway. This does allow black to destroy white's central pawn structure.
I think he just doesn't care because he's looking at that pawn in the long term. So he's looking at something like bishop c4, dc4, c5. Yeah, you kept all your pawns, but I played b3. The knight on d3, yeah, I think we're already talking about maybe white is just winning this position. Because let's say you play some move. I don't know, Robert. What kind of move here would you make? I don't see it. Anyway, knight b2, d3 is coming, and then a6. Whether you keep it or not is a long-term weakness, and also white can play e5 at the right moment, and the knight on d3 is an outpost. c5 is weak long-term. I think white wins this position very often. So I don't think Ding will want to take on c4.
No, I agree. But if you don't take on c4, you can't play d5 very easily. This rook still is hanging on b8. This rook b5 idea, I mean, it's still there. He plays a5. I think that is a smart play at this point. He does not want to worry about the a6 pawn forever because it wasn't just about being in the bishop's sight. That once this knight played b3, knight b2, now at least the queen defends this pawn a5. So you have given it some defense. That's a good thing. And at some point, d5 may be in the equation. I know this rook is hanging over here, but this rook is likely to move, and then you have to look out for d5. Or we could see take and e5 at the right moment, but black will get play of his own. That's the good news for Ding. If the f-file opens up, there will be some activity for Ding, and he's not just going to have to sit and wonder, what am I doing here?
What about a preparatory move? So you're not afraid of bishop c4 at the moment. d5 is for the moment not a threat. Because of bishop takes b8. So maybe bishop to h2. And my point is I want to take on e6 and e5, but I don't want the bishop to be potentially attacked with knight to d5. So I play bishop h2, and my idea is to take an e5.
Can I just tell you how much of a super grandmaster you are? Let's ask the chat. Be honest with us. How many of you were thinking about this calm, retreating move, bishop h2? And I want your full honesty because all of you found it, of course. But Fabi finds this great idea saying that, let's say I make a waiting move like h6, then I take, and h6 may be particularly troublesome, and I play e5. I'm trying to crack open the position, and I didn't want my bishop in that rook sight. So if you take, I could take with the rook and hit e6 and put more pressure on a5. I could take with the bishop to attack d4 and attack the b8 rook, but I'm not giving black that much needed activity. I'm not giving a sort of tempo shot. So yeah, great idea by Fabi and by all of chat. I know you saw bishop h2 as well.
But isn't it kind of amazing in that final position that you were showing that black wasn't doing too terribly? Maybe it's a lot about piece activity, and black's pieces are getting active in those positions. The structure is a mess. I mean, you don't have to be Jan Nepomniachtchi to see that black structure is pretty lousy. But maybe the piece activity is, and he plays queen to f3. And I was going to say maybe the piece activity is compensating for the structural problems in that position. So queen f3 also makes sense. He's preparing e5 in some cases. I like this approach. Maybe he also wants to say that knight d7 could be met by queen to g3, but then bishop h4. So what's wrong with knight d7 here? I want to make that move because I want to potentially use the e5 square. For example, bishop c4, knight e5 ideas, things like that. Not sure if that's really what black wants, but knight d7 feels like a harmonious move here. So how are you responding to that move?
Well, e5 is no longer available, and it looks like Ding, he's on the clock here, but this looks like a very good try because e5 doesn't have the same force to it. As you see, the evaluation bar drops.
Here, d5 is disastrous for white.
Your bishop gets in trouble, exactly. So rook b7 played instead. That's a very Ding move, and I mean that in a complimentary way. Tanya, Fabi plays bishop h2. I would never have thought about that. Rook b7, also wasn't thinking in that direction, but he is threatening d5, and he's taking advantage of the fact that the queen stepped in the line of this rook.
Rook b7, another one of those prophylactic moves, similar to the concepts of just moving the back from h2, right? Just clear up and make sure that your pieces are safe. And Ding is returning the favor with keeping his own pieces safe. He wants to get d5 in. The rook on b8 was a target. He moves one square up and says d5 is in the air, but will he have enough time? Because with that queen on f3, I also see a tender spot on c6. And maybe this could be the moment for Jan Nepomniachtchi to actually strike in the center. The move that we've been looking at in different lines with different ideas, e5, is the first move that I think we should deep dive into. You hit not only the knight, not only the pawn on d6, but a potential picking up of an extra pawn on c6.
And as we dive into that, I just want to give YouTube chat a quick shout out because you were honest. Most of you said that you did not see bishop h2 that Fabiano was pointing out in that previous